Hello, good morning. Welcome to this webinar, Debtors Management Tools Every SME Needs. I'm Peter Towers, Managing Director of ESS BizTools. Debtors Management, a strategic advisory opportunity for accountants and bookkeepers to assist your clients to overcome their problems. Debtors' problems can quickly lead to severe fiscal management issues. And we may have struck this, but I think that we need to look very closely at what the Small Business Ombudsman has been saying about the state of Australian small businesses in recent times. The Ombudsman produces a fairly extensive report every 3 months, which is uploaded to the website, and members of ESS BizTools can access these reports in the members area of ESS BizTools. The Ombudsman's reported that thousands of SMEs around Australia are in financial difficulties. Failure rate, according to the Ombudsman, is at the highest level ever. That's not a very good situation, is it? And I read somewhere the other day that construction industry have now got problems in about 30% of their businesses. So a significant amount of the problems are caused through lack of understanding of the debtors system. And that's what we're here to discuss today. Incidentally, if you have any questions during this presentation, please type your question into chat. If you're watching this on the live feed to social media, you won't be able to do that. So if you have questions, please send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au. And if you're watching this video at a time more suitable to you, you won't be able to send a message direct to me, but please send an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au. So a significant amount of the problems are caused because of a lack of understanding. People just start a business and think that they know all these things. And I think it really highlights the need for accountants to be offering mentoring advice when someone's still considering either starting or buying a business, especially if they've never run a small business before. The MYOB survey of new business operators was reported in the Financial Review in February 2024. I think it's still a very valuable article to read. And they indicated that a significant number of new business operators identified a number of deficiencies after 6 months. Now, all the deficiencies were not just in debtors, but all I'm highlighting here today are the debtors issues that were highlighted. Not understanding that credit terms do not have to be offered to each customer. I found that very strange, but that's what MYOB discovered, according to the MYOB CEO. This is basic communication with these businesses. Now, I know part of the problem is some people start a business and really don't get advice from anyone in an accounting capacity. They might get advice from someone they have a drink with or they play golf with, but we need to be getting the message across to the SME community that accountants and bookkeepers can give advice on commercial matters relative to running a business, not just taxation issues. They don't have a debtors management system. They haven't really thought that through. Not appreciating the need for ongoing monitoring and follow-up of debtors. I found one of the strangest reactions to the MYOB report was that there was a strong expectation by the people who were surveyed that anyone they'd given a credit account to would pay on a 30-day basis. I think that really highlighted that a lot of those people had never been in business running a small business before. They may have been employed in a big business or a government department. But compare that type of role to someone even in a fairly senior position, now thrust into running a small business. The business is probably trading for 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And now they've got to do all of the jobs, probably even including the cleaning. But in the clerical and management administration sense, they're having to worry about a whole range of issues that they may have known were being undertaken in their previous employment in the background, but they were not directly responsible for it. We need to communicate. And one of the other big problems that MYOB discovered was that a number of the people interviewed didn't have an awareness of the importance of debtors' days outstanding, the number. Now, I know it should be around 30 days. I agree with the sentiment of some of those firms that were interviewed by MYOB, but unfortunately, it's a very rare business who are offering 30-day terms who are got a 30-day outstanding. Someone told me once that they did have, their debtors were running at 30 days, but when I inquired, their terms were 7 days. They were in the meat supply industry, and I knew a lot about the meat industry. I'd been the chief financial officer and company secretary of a large meat company, and I knew the meat industry was on 7 days. So when I inquired, I found, yes, the accounts were on 7 days. So having debtors having an average of 30 days was very abnormal. So we need to make sure we're understanding what the comparisons are. The key take out of all this is SMEs need a management manual, management of their debtors. They need manuals or systems on everything in their business, but today we're concentrating on debtors. And this is a role that you can envisage. The vast majority of your clients will not have the inclination, the time, or the knowledge to be able to set up an effective debtors system. And it is very important. My general advice to anyone starting to run a small business, if you don't have to give credit, don't give it. And then they don't have to worry about debtors. Everything's cash or credit card. But the reality is that a lot of our clients have to give credit if they are going to make sales. So they need a debtors management system that's customised to suit their business. Now, by that I mean there can be terminologies in the business. They mightn't call it a tax invoice for argument's sake. It might have some other name. Or they might use some colour codes. I got caught out when I was a young accountant recently after graduating, where I got given an audit manual and got told to go to a fairly large company that we were doing a branch audit on. And my next step in the audit manual was to check the cash receipts book. So I went and asked the lady who'd been given as my person of reference to go to when I was looking for anything. And I said to her, "Can I have the cash receipt book?" She said, "The what?" I said, "The cash receipt book." Oh, I've never heard of that before. I'll go and find it. Well, about 40 minutes later, she still hadn't returned, so I went looking for her. And I found her in the archives area searching. I said, can't you find? They'd be using it every day. And another young lady walked up and she must have heard this commotion and said, "You're not looking for the green book, are you?" And they had colour-coded all of their records. It wasn't noted in the audit manual. I had a bit of a whinge to my manager when I got back and said, "Did you know they've colour-coded all their records? They've got red books, blue books, green books, purple books, yellow books." They had all sorts of books for every function. So it was an eye-opener to me. I'd never seen that before. But make sure that if you are developing a debtor system, that you put the code words or whatever else they start calling things. But you don't have to develop the debtor system. We have it within ESS BizTools, and I'm going to show you that a little bit later. But we've done the hard work. We've developed the system. You can edit it, though. Brand it with the client's name. and then review it each year to make sure there hasn't been any variations creep in. I've called the person that looks after debtors in most businesses the poor person. Not financially poor, but they tend to be, in my observation, the last person hired, and a lot of them are ladies, and they're given this job to do to look after the debtors with no training. In most cases, have not undertaken the job for a previous employer. They're asked to do this very important job. This is a valuable asset. What's the value of the debtors in the balance sheet? $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, $500,000? And someone with no training, no tuition, is given the job of being in charge of debtors. I don't think that's right. And that's one of the reasons we've got a debtors systems manual, so that that person has got a reference book and they should be trained. Part of your annual work arrangement with a client that you're offering advisory services to, financial, commercial, management accounting advisory services, which is the real business operations, should include a session with the person in charge of debtors to make sure that he or she understands the function. If they've got any queries, answer them. A credit application form is vital. Now, I've seen some strange systems for opening credit accounts. I went to a business once and I said, oh, can we open an account? And he said, you got a business card? I said, yes. And I gave him the business card. And he said, okay, that's all right. And he gave me an account. Now, I don't think he knew me. He looked at the business card and saw who I was. But his rule of thumb seemed to be, well, if the person had a business card, they must be all right. I don't agree with that. Myself accepted, of course, but no, let's not joke. It's serious. I think a credit application form should be completed and then it should be checked. The referees should be contacted. Were they happy to support this new applicant for credit from your client's business or from the business itself? And if they're operating as a company, obtaining the director's guarantees is very important. Now, hopefully they'll never be needed, but they need to be obtained and then filed. But there needs to also be some observation as to what happens in that company. If all those directors resign over the next couple of years and get replaced by other people, I think it's appropriate to be going back to that company and saying, if you want to continue to trade with us, you need to supply us new directors' guarantee forms. But the key is to make sure those documents are filed, because hopefully they're never going to be required, but it could be 5, 10, even longer years' time that unfortunately you need to find them. There should be a procedure for approving a new customer. And the way we do it is there's a credit application form. The person in charge of debtors goes through and does the preliminary work, marks what he or she have done, and then passes it on to their manager, who might be the general manager or owner of the business, but they can see what's been undertaken in this process to make sure everything's been covered. And then I think the big opportunity from a marketing point of view is to send out a welcome to new customer letter. It's very important because it gives your client the opportunity to confirm their terms of trade. Thank you for applying for us for a credit account. We've approved your application for a credit account. This is what it is. Now, it could be a financial limit. Your credit's limited to $1,000 or $5,000 or whatever. But it's the time to really confirm what's going to happen as far as the process is concerned. The first question I think should be, does your client's new customer require any additional information with a tax invoice other than the tax invoice? And this relates to things like weighbridge certificates, certificate of origin certificates in some industries. And other health certificates that might be required. Because what will happen is, unless the customer receives those certificates with the tax invoice, they won't pay them. They'll just ignore them until they finally get the right records. And this is one of the reasons why debtors' days outstanding blow out. Because the supplier has not followed through clearly on what the customer wants. Now, it's a bit difficult if the customer hasn't specified what they want at the very beginning. And this is why you should have in the forms, the credit application form, a clear indicator. If you want anything else, like a weighbridge certificate, maybe give some of those examples, e.g., you make sure that you're told. And the terms of trading need to be specified. My recommendation is, if your client's trading on a 30-day account basis, that every tax invoice should have clearly identified on it the due date for payment. And that is communicated to the new customer, and that the new customer welcome letter should also indicate that 3 or 4 days before that due date, they will be contacted as a friendly reminder, so that they don't get all upset because they're getting phone calls from your client's business. Just put it in the welcome to new customer letter. But the other big benefit is from a marketing point of view. As accountants, we need to think of the marketing. We need to do a lot more marketing ourselves. But that's another subject, and I'm going to run a separate webinar on that soon. But the marketing concept is to have a message from the sales manager or someone else in the marketing sales area, welcoming this new customer into the fold, inviting them. Perhaps there's a function coming up or some product demonstration or a closed evening whereby they can have first viewing of a new range of products that you've got to demonstrate. It's a great marketing opportunity, a direct communication. So I talked about the identification of the additional documentation, and I've already got in and talked about the introducing of the sales team. There's also another very important thing, and that's called the Personal Property Securities Register. Your client needs to make a decision whether they need to register this new customer on the Personal Property Securities Register. And if so, there's certain processes to go to. Now, today's presentation is not on the Personal Property Securities Register. We'll do that another time also. But you need to make sure then that that's communicated in the welcome to new customer letter, and that the forms that are required to be signed by the customer relating to documentation that ultimately will be lodged with the Personal Property Securities Register is identified and then followed through so that it's received. One of the other benefits of the Personal Property Securities Register relates to liquidators' claims of preferential payment. So it's, again, we're not here to go through all aspects of the Personal Property Securities Register today, but it does interact with debtors. So it's worth following through to make sure that if you have clients who might be putting pressure on a business to make sure that they're paid and paid more generously than others, they may need additional protection. So day-to-day activities relating to debtors, what are they? I think it's important that there's a current list of the customers that require additional information, additional documentation of their tax invoices, all those things I talked about before: weighbridge certificate, health certificate, origin of product certificates, compliance with whatever other condition that the customer has said that they want. It's a good idea for the administration section of the business to make sure the people at the coalface, the salespeople, have got that, because you want them to produce it and attach it to the tax invoice. Because if that document's not attached, you can bet your bottom dollar the tax invoice won't be paid. A few years ago, I was speaking at a conference in a mining town, and we had about 45 people there, and there were obviously competitors and mates and all sorts of mixtures in the room. And we got to debtors' days outstanding, and we were talking about it. And someone said, "How come my debtors' days outstanding is very high? Well, what do you think it should be?" And I said, "Well, what industry?" And they were in an industry supplying the mining industry, as I could have guessed, in that particular auditorium. And I found out from that gentleman that his debtors' days outstanding was up over 80 days. And someone down the front row said, loud enough for me to hear, I don't know if he meant the whole room to hear, well, if he did his documentation right, he'd get paid promptly. I said, you know a bit about this? He said, yeah, I'm one of his competitors, but he's also a mate. And I keep on telling him he's got to lodge the weighbridge certificates each time, and he doesn't do it. So he now whinges that his debtors' days outstanding is way up beyond 80 days. I said, what's yours? He said, oh, about 35, 36 days. He said, I lodge all the paperwork, and the way it goes, the mine that we service, the payments are made out of Melbourne. We're a long way from Melbourne. So if you don't get it right, you are going to be waiting at least one further 30-day cycle, and you may even go into another one because they will not pay it. So we need to make sure our clients understand this, because this is cash being tied up in this thing called debtors. Most SMEs could do with the use of it in their businesses. And that's what the MYOB survey found out, because they found that a lot of the people who had started their businesses after 6 months had run into real difficulties because they assumed everyone would pay them on a 30-day basis. They gave credit to anyone who asked for it, so they had no idea about their background. And they were not indicating due date for payments on tax invoices. I often say, I hope they never got accounting advice, even though they should have, but they would have been better advised. And I think it's a courtesy to make those phone calls and tell the clients you're going to do it. In the ESS Biz Tools, we have a concept of the 52-week business advisory system, and that is based on daily, weekly, monthly cycles, a rhythm of activities. Now, the daily report, I don't see the accountants who are offering advisory services being involved in the preparation of the daily report, other than setting up that report and making sure it is then prepared by someone within the client's business, and making sure you get a copy of it so that you, as the partner or senior manager or one of your team, can quickly read it and see if there's any issues. And if there's an issue and you're offering the advisory services, there then should be a reaction, getting onto them, finding out what went wrong. So on that daily list, which I envisage is 1 to 2 pages, that's all, and it's going to the leadership team. It's a daily report. It shows information like cash in bank yesterday, debtors today, what's the yesterday, sorry, what's the debtors balance, and then a list of the people who are owing large payments that, based on the due date for payment of the tax invoices, are due for payment this week. Because what it's meant to do is to motivate the leadership team member responsible for that account or that area to say, oh, okay, and the other item on that daily report will be the amount of money that has to get paid out this week. Well, there might be wages, there might be superannuation, and there's a whole stack of creditors that if they're not paid, they're probably not going to make supplies. So hopefully that would motivate that leadership team member to get on the phone or to get on into his car and go out and see that customer and make sure they get that payment, because the business needs it. And details of any business that is not paid by their due date should also be clearly identified. We've designed our system to help you to be able to talk to your clients and say, overall, the original dealings are set up through a person in the office and the manager, the account's been given. and then a system to ensure that the due date for payments on tax invoices and someone within the office or some other type of system contacts the debtor 3 or 4 days before the payment's due. But there's not much more they can do. Obviously, they're going to calculate debtors' days outstanding. We'll get to that shortly. It then becomes part of the leadership team problem because most SMEs have not got a separate debtors manager as such, someone that's going to be living on making the phone calls. If they haven't got that responsibility should then be shared amongst the leadership team. So you want to make sure they are getting the reports on a daily basis and then followed up on a weekly basis. These are the debtors that are outstanding. We need to contact them. We need to go and get their money from them. We'll find out what their problem is. Maybe they're sitting back saying, we were supposed to get a health certificate and we haven't got it. So we're not telling you until you contact us. Financial management of debtors. The calculation of the debtors' days outstanding is a very important figure. Now, it requires that the balancing off of debtors is undertaken promptly at the end of a month. I've heard of situations where people are taking nearly 3 weeks to balance off debtors for a month. I can't work out why that would occur. And there's no way that they're going to have control over their debtors' days outstanding if it's taking that long. I think 2 working days after the end of the month. Calculate the debtors. Now, the business should have determined a long time ago whether they're still going to send debtors statements. And if they're not, that should have been clearly indicated in the welcome to new customer letter. But in any case, everything should be balanced off so that the analysis can be prepared to calculate the debtors' days outstanding figure. And that should be compared back to what's been included in the cash flow forecast. We're not covering cash flow forecast today. That's another webinar. But it's very important because all these things are interlinked. So if the calculation of debtors' days outstanding comes back that it's 47 days, a reference should be made to, in the budgets, we've only got it in 39 days. What's caused that blowout? That could represent a lot of money. And is it because someone hasn't been knocking on the door, making the phone calls? There's an old saying, of course, that the squeaky door gets the oil. And that's what happens in debtors. So keeping debtors under control. A few years ago, Australia received a very unwelcome recognition. We're awarded the longest debtors' days outstanding in the world. At the time, the then Small Business Ombudsman, Kate Carnell, called this an enormous scandal on small business operators in Australia. And I agree with it. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's been much changes. I haven't heard of any other country being given that award since, which was judged on an international basis from an organisation in England. The Australian government, the Liberal government of the time when that original report was prepared, and then the current Labor government have both introduced legislation to encourage businesses with turnovers over $100 million to pay SMEs within 30 days. Now, the legislation, as I understand it from reading some of the reports, is based on shaming a business that is not paying their SMEs within 30 days. I don't know how successful that's going to be. But one suggestion I'm going to make to you, if you've got clients who are having problems with major corporations, it's a bit difficult just to complain to those major corporations, I realise that, but it would be well worth making contact with the Small Business Ombudsman, who is a former Minister for Small Business in the previous Liberal National Party government, who was then hired by the Labor government to become the small business ombudsman after Kate Carnell retired. You could contact the ombudsman and tell them the problem, and see if they can make inquiries and find out what's happening. Because as I understand the literature I've read, the government's established a separate section of bureaucrats in Canberra to monitor all this. So we need to make sure that they're getting details of companies who are not performing their activities in the correct manner. So complaints have been lodged so that they can go through the shaming process. Assistance that accountants can provide to SMEs. I think it's the debtor systems manual that you establish and indicate to your clients that you've established the system and that you will undertake some training so that the person, I called the poor person, has an understanding of his or her role. Make sure that the terms of trade within the business are being consistently set. I've come across a situation where there seems to be some favourites and they'll be given slightly different terms. That's confusing. And in that particular case, no one had bothered to tell the poor person responsible for debtors that, oh, yes, we gave them 45-day payment terms, but no one had bothered to tell that person. That lady had made a phone call and got abused. So we need to make sure that the communications within the organisations are followed. I'd be querying why there would be a variation in any case, but that's up to the management leadership team of individual businesses to determine, of course. If the business is still sending statements to their customers, check whether the statements are being prepared promptly. I've said 2 days, and are emailed promptly. Email, not snail mail. Because if they're still sending statements out, there's a fair chance that a significant number of their customers won't think about making a payment until they receive those statements. If they're mailed to them, it can be 7 or 8 days later in various parts of Australia before that mail's received. I think we should be saying to clients to email statements if they're still sending statements. And continually remind your clients of the necessity for ongoing due diligence in the monitoring of all aspects of the debtors management system. Within ESS BizTools, we produce a monthly newsletter, which we call Business Plus. The next edition's due this week. We upload it on the second Friday of a month to our website, and our members download it, badge it with their name, and send it out to their clients. I try to ensure that about every 3 months there's an article on debtors management, because these newsletters are going to the clients of those members of ESS BizTools, and the history, the results, the feedback, the MYOB report in particular, continually highlight that there's a lot of problems with debtors management, so that we're trying to communicate to the SMEs that they need to pay closer attention, or you change your terms of engagement with the client if you're not doing the complete advisory services role, that you're at least monitoring debtors, and perhaps every 3 months you go and do a review audit and see what's happening with debtors. What's the debtors' days outstanding? Who's on the follow-up list? What can be done to improve the overall situation? So I'm now just going to go to share screen. That's all I want. Yeah. I was hoping to link to our website, but unfortunately, I don't seem to be able to link to our website. We have had some technical issues today, so that might be the problem. So I'm very sorry about that. Um, I'll continue with want to know more. If you would like to see the debtors systems manual or a summary of it, if you could send me an email and I will get that sent round to you in the next couple of days. But at this stage, unfortunately, that link is not available. So if you want to know more information, please contact us. You can send me a email for a complimentary Zoom meeting. Takes about 40 minutes. You send an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au, or you could visit our website, www.essbiztools.com.au, where you can view the packages which ESS BizTools has available, which unfortunately I'm not able to show you. There is a question, thanks. My apologies, I just noticed it on my screen. How long the outstanding debtors can be chased up or legal action? Well, that gets back to your terms of trade, but you can instigate legal action against a customer, but I suspect that the debt would probably have to be outstanding more than 30 days. There are small court tribunals which you can take small amounts to. If it's major amounts, it will potentially end up a major court case. If you're going to have your clients taking action to recover debtors, you need to make sure that they have appropriate systems in place, and that along the lines of what I've talked to you today about, so that you have the documentation. I've done a lot of expert witnessing work in various court cases over the years, and one of the common comments that you find from the legal fraternity is that the systems have not been properly implemented by the businesses. They don't have the documentation to prove what was said and what was done and what was supplied at times. So it's a bit like the supporting documentation to be attached to an invoice. If it's agreed that that's going to be supplied, you need to make sure that your client is doing that. Otherwise, there will be difficulties. So I hope that answers that particular situation. Yeah, that's the same one I just answered. You can go to our website, www.essbiztools.com.au, and look at the packages. Incidentally, we do have the debtor systems manual available as a standalone product, so you can just subscribe to that separately if you wish, but it's far cheaper on an overall basis to subscribe to one of the three major packages which we have in ESS BizTools. The first one is the starter package. The second one is the advanced package, and everything in the starter package has been rolled over into the advanced package, and then obviously more information and data has been added. And then we have the financial forecasting package, which includes everything that's gone before in the starter and the advance, together with a whole range of matters primarily centered around offering the Chief Financial Officer service. So thank you for being with us today. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to send us a email, and we will get back to you. If the business is still sending statements to their customers, check whether the statements have been dispatched by email, because that's very important, within 2 days at the end of the month, not weeks later, like happens in some situations that I come across, and I suspect you've also come across those. There's no way in the world that a business is going to keep its debtors' days outstanding under control if they're taking 2 to 3 weeks to issue statements, and they're relying on statements for the receipt of payments from their customers. And also make sure that all the documentation that the customers requested is supplied. Otherwise, they won't pay your clients. So this is the basic requirements for the implementing of a system to assist in the debtors management to improve the situation for your clients. So what I want to do now is go to the ESS BizTools website, where we're going to be able to bring up the website and show it to you. So on the site now, we have the full ESS BizTools website. It's divided into 3 key product packages: the starter package, the advanced package, and the financial forecasting package. Everything that's in the first package flows into the second package, and more gets added, and then more gets added, and everything gets flowed into the financial forecasting package, which is the overall package which will enable you to offer Chief Financial Officer services, or in-house accounting services, if you prefer to call it that way, to your SME clients. What I'm now going to share with you is the SME Debtor Systems Manual. So on the left-hand side here, we've got some of the content of ESS BizTools. I'm going to the SME Debtor Systems Manual. We're going to bring that up and show you that system for you to look at and get an idea of what we're talking about. So that's the preamble information. So we click on. This is the summary of the contents of the SME Debtor Systems Manual. There is a procedure control form. There's that sort of documentation for everything within ESS BizTools. Then we've got the various forms that we've talked about in this presentation: the application to open an account, the personal director's guarantees, internal advice, and so on. So I'm going to find you the Debtor Systems Manual, which we'll now bring up. So the Debtor Systems Manual, and I just have to so you can now see the Debtor Systems Manual on the front page, and you would badge this with your name on it, the client's name. And you can edit this document, as I said earlier in the presentation, to make sure that it's in line with other documentation or other systems, or the terminology being utilised within your client's business. There's a set of contents. So remember, this is the manual which will guide the person, who I refer to as the poor person, who's got the responsibility of debtors management within your client and there's a fair bit of information in there, as you can see, and there's addendums. So introduction to effective debtors management, the explanation of why we've got a written system. We talk about the director's guarantee, documentation, the welcome to new customer letter, notification of customer requirements, retention of title, preparation of tax invoices, and we have various documentation, debtors management checklists for the business to use to monitor, setting up an effective debtor system, credit application form. So let's go to a credit application form. We'll bring that up. So this is a form. Obviously, you can edit this and would edit it. Getting details of who the applicant is, what legal entity they are. They are sole trader, public company, proprietary company. Who's involved in the business? Who are the directors or the shareholders? Is it a sole trader? Names of the directors. That's who you will be looking for directors' guarantees from. Trust application. So this is getting full details. And if someone who wants credit's not prepared to supply this, I would seriously doubt whether your client should be dealing with them. And here's the terms of credit that have been summarised. Now, if they don't agree with what your client's offer is, you would edit it to make sure it covers all the situation. Who's authorising the credit application? Answers from the referees. A provision there for 3 referees. Checking that we've got the director's guarantees and they've been appropriately filed. So that's the process for the determination of that information. The director's guarantee form is an example of it. Whether to decline a credit application, letter to the client, internal advice on the new customer to make sure that the sales department are aware that we've got a new customer and that we should be looking to support them, communicate with them. New customer details, contact person, terms of trade, contact person to be contacted. Conditions requested by customer on tax invoice and documentation to accompany tax invoice. That's the weighbridge certificates, health certificates, or whatever else the client is looking to be supplied to them. Some material on the Personal Property Securities Register. Due diligence on new customers. Approving a prospective customer. Let's go to the welcome to new customer letter. So we're advising them the credit limit, the payment terms are. client using this system would be saying we're calculating our due dates for payment based on the individual tax invoices. We do not issue debtor statements. Please pay on the tax invoices. We're attaching our terms of trade agreement. We're attaching our retention of title agreement. Please sign. They're very important if your client wishes to register this customer on the Personal Property Securities Register. And there's a copy of the document for the customer's file as well. So this is the information that's contained within the system of ESS BizTools. Hopefully that gives you a good indication of what is available from this package to assist your client to be able to offer these services to a client, a customer, that they are able to assist. So if you want to know more information on ESS BizTools, about the packages that we offer, please visit our website, www.essbiztools.com.au, or you can book a complimentary 40-minute Zoom meeting. Just send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and we will arrange that at a convenient time to suit you and obviously my calendar as well. So I look forward to hearing from you. And if you have any queries on any aspect of debtors management, please don't hesitate to contact us. Have a great day. Goodbye.